From Vassar College, this is Conversations at the Salt Line with Wesley Dixon. On this episode, a conversation with Mike Gillis.
Hey everyone, it's me, Wes, and we're here with another episode of Conversations at the Salt Line. I'm here today with a special guest, Mike Gillis, head writer at The Onion, who is here on campus participating in the Institute for the Liberal Arts Signature Program about storytelling and higher education. Thank you so much for being here, Mike.
It's my pleasure. I'm excited for this.
Well, I learned something about you this morning that we have in common.
Oh, really?
Yes. Well, so I should give some background. I have awkwardly stumbled into situations on the podcast where I have unintentionally embarrassed guests by talking about someone who I assumed who they knew that they were.
Okay.
And they didn't know who they were. Let me give you the example.
Yeah.
So Sarah Koenig, who is the Serial podcast producer, was here on the podcast a couple of months ago, and I was talking about Wendy Williams because Wendy Williams and I share a birthday.
Okay. Congratulations.
I know. Well, let me tell you the full cocktail party joke.
Sure.
So the joke goes like this: I share a birthday with two people, Wendy Williams and Nelson Mandela.
Wow.
And I aspired to be the perfect combination of two. That's the full cocktail joke.
And those were the vibes that I got walking in.
That is so kind of you. I don't know if I can take it seriously, though, given your role and given who you are. So I don't know if
you take me deadly seriously.
Seriously?
This is not going to be a funny podcast, folks. You guys got to turn off those expectations.
Let me put all this stuff away. I don't know what I'm in for. But so Sarah Koenig didn't know who Wendy Williams was.
Okay.
And I was sort of like, I just don't know what to tell you because I assumed someone who like produced and hosted and created like one of the most viral podcasts ever would know like one of the voices of radio like of the last 50 years. And she just didn't.
Yeah.
So you know who Wendy Williams is, obviously.
Yes.
Okay. But I learned this morning that we did not know who the same person was. I had to pull out my paper so I could read the name. Greg Louganis.
Did not know Greg Louganis.
I still don't really know who Greg Louganis is.
They didn't explain it very well. They have this secret club where they all talk about Greg Louganis as if it's like the most common person in history, but it's nothing.
For those who don't know, so Mike and I were at an event earlier today, and two of the panelists who were on the panel with Mike had this shared interaction professionally with Greg Louganis, and it became obvious that Mike was the only panelist who didn't know who that person was. I was in the audience secretly sort of like, I'm with Mike. I don't know who this person is.
I felt like deeply shamed to be on stage and not know this guy. And they all talked to me like I was a child afterwards, like I was a mental infant.
They did treat you in a very infantile way.
They told me my opinion was meaningless if I didn't know Greg Louganis.
Did they say that?
They said that.
I don't know that I heard them
check
say
the record.
That, Mike. I'm going to check.
Said that.
I don't know
they
if I
said that
heard
to my face.
Well, listen, we're happy to have you at Vassar nonetheless.
It's my pleasure
And
to be here.
because you're here, I had to sort of just look up. I was so curious. I had to sort of see what Vassar's imprint on The Onion was, where we showed up on The Onion.
Yeah.
And I actually had never looked before I prepared to talk to you. Yeah. And so, not surprisingly, maybe, we show up all over the place. You type in the Vassar keyword in the search thing on The Onion, and there's tons of things that come up.
Yeah.
So I picked 3 of the entries, and I want to sort of see what your reaction is and what your sort of diagnostic is about Vassar after we're sort of seeing just these 3 sample data points of Vassar.
Let's
you
dive
ready?
in.
Okay. So the first one, the headline is, Horrible Couple Really Wants Wedding to Reflect Their Personalities. That's the headline. And the part at which Vassar is mentioned is in the section that follows. The bride, a Vassar College graduate, has suggested that the, quote, patriarchy implicit in many marriage customs, end quote, will be omitted from the occasion, including the, quote, subtext of property transference, end quote, in the custom of the bride's father walking his daughter down the aisle. Furthermore, instead of trading wedding rings, the pair said they will wear bracelets hewn from teak driftwood the couple collected on a trip to Cambodia in 2009. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
That's one.
Yeah.
We have 2 more. The headline for the second is Everything the FBI Sees During the Raid at Mar-a-Lago.
Right.
And one entry is a Vassar acceptance letter.
Oh, amazing. Okay. So this is an infographic about
it was
the
an
Mar-a-Lago
infographic,
raid.
yeah. So this is the infographic about the Mar-a-Lago raid.
Classic,
Yeah. And the second is also sort of an infographic related thing. And the headline is Students Explain How College Has Censored Them. And the one Vassar student who they interviewed in that project, Anna Conlon, Vassar class of 2004, says, quote, the administration refuses to add the New York Times op-ed piece I wrote about campus censorship to the curriculum.
Yeah.
So you keep saying yeah, so I have to imagine you feel like these things are either consistent with the Onion's culture of headlines and brand of satire and or consistent with your view of Vassar, such that these kinds of jokes about Vassar make sense to you.
It feels a little bit like I'm in the hot seat right now. It feels like you're kind of trying to hold my feet to the fire. And you promised me a fluffy interview that was mostly positive about the Onion. It seems like you want to shut down open conversations about what's wrong with liberal arts campuses. Pretty gentle ribbing too.
You think so?
Yeah, I think basically what we're saying is Vassar is a good school.
Yeah.
And it's a good liberal arts school, but also maybe a little disconnected from reality and potentially you like all good liberal arts campuses should be, maybe throwing the Vassar name into a random like Mar-a-Lago raid, it adds a little bit of spice to it. It's like, oh, that's a specific reference, but it also connects to my sense that a Vassar grad would be a specific type of person.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of all we're saying with that.
I think that sounds like a reasonable interpretation.
Okay, good. And all just positive conversation about the Onion from now on, please.
I can try, but I can't promise.
All right.
We'll have to see where it goes.
We'll see. And if not, our lawyers will be in touch and we'll shut you down.
I'm okay with that.
We will destroy this podcast.
I'm a bulldog. It's okay. I'm happy to talk to the Onion lawyers.
Okay,
it's
awesome.
no
Let's do it.
problem.
Okay.
But it was very fun, honestly, looking up Vassar's touch points with the Onion. And it is true that I'd be lying if I said to you that my colleagues and I sometimes don't turn to each other and say, like, this place has to be a TV show.
Right.
Like, I literally am like, if I just put a camera in the top corner of the president's office and just click record for probably like 12 hours, that is a sizzle reel for either Bravo's next show or a Lifetime movie or whatever. So it's not surprising to me that we made an appearance on The Onion as well.
I think that's also, it speaks to the fact that everyday life has all of these gems like hidden inside of it.
Yes.
A lot of the time we aren't conscious of it. And what The Onion does really well, I think, is crystallize those feelings of like, there's an Onion headline that's like, nation endures sight of coworkers' unseemly faces for 4,000th time in a row or something like that. And it's just like, everyone has that. You go in the morning, you're like, if I see Jim again, I'm going to lose it. I can't look at his stupid face again. Not because Jim has a stupid face, obviously, but just like the joke is on the observer.
Yes.
It's like, there's nothing inherently wrong with your coworkers.
Yes.
They're all normal people, but you build up kind of a ridiculous observation about them over the course of time. And a lot of the times we don't focus on our internal life and how funny and absurd it can be.
Yes.
Like, if you just think about it, our daily life, we are walking around with this constant person talking to us who's just saying like, what should I do next? What is the next sentence that comes out of my mouth going to be really dumb? Is Wes actually, he's laughing at me, but secretly he's mocking me and thinks I'm an idiot. And like, that's a crazy thing to have in the back of your mind all of the time.
Yeah.
And if you just focus on that stuff, then you can you can build like a sitcom out of it. You can build an Onion headline out of it, because it's like the recognition and the shared humanity that comes out of it is what's really beautiful and what makes it resonant.
Absolutely. I want to keep talking about that. It's funny. I'm an only child, so I grew up entertaining myself, obviously.
Yeah.
And so the voice that's in our heads that you're talking about is actually just out loud in my house.
Right.
I'm in my house screaming, laughing.
Absolutely.
But to your point, it's because I'm aware of like how absurd or ridiculous so many things are that I either do or witness or experience every single day. And letting myself sort of acknowledge that and laugh about me, present about it, makes being only child by myself really fun because you're sort of like your own entertainment, you know? And I think The Onion, to your point, is tapping into the fact that we all, either individually or collectively as a society, can be our own entertainment. We don't have to sort of outsource.
Yes. And like, to your point, there's an Onion headline that's like, study average American becomes unhinged, psychotic moment they get home alone by themselves. And it's just kind of all about like, you like start singing like la 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 and like inflate your cheeks out and smack them back and forth. And you're just like, that is the behavior of like a truly deranged person, but we all
but
kind of
many
do
of us
it.
do those kinds of things.
and we act as if that isn't part of our daily lives. And it's just really, it's fun to acknowledge that and just like go for it and talk about it openly.
I love that. So I want to get back in a little bit into the sort of role of satire in a whole bunch of different dimensions, but I wanted to sort of start grounding our conversation in something that I heard you say in a different conversation with someone about satire and maybe The Onion, which is you quoted a British or maybe even German. It sounds German, but I think he's British philosopher, Ludwig Wittgenberg. Is this right?
Wittgenstein. Yeah.
Wittgenstein. Yeah. And the quote was, I might paraphrase, it was, the purpose of philosophy, but you sort of made a proxy for satire, was to help the fly find its way out of the fly bottle.
Right. Yeah.
And I sort of interpret that as sort of like helping someone to wayfind or sort of, you know, see through the mist, see through the fog, and sort of make sense where they are. Right. And so I'm just curious, you said that maybe several years ago, and I'm curious if today you reflect on the role of satire the same. You think that still is the role, the primary role, or one of the main roles of satire?
I think it's still true. I think of satire slightly differently now.
Okay.
Because I grew up in an America that's very different from the America that we're in right now in terms of the protections for satire and kind of the legal threats that satirists faced. And I think I always looked at the role of a comedian in America as very privileged, and so it kind of seemed ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like you're standing up on stage and saying, "I'm so important. Oh my God, I'm so important. Look at me, I'm amazing." When a stand-up comedian thought they were doing something really civically minded by writing a stupid joke, and I still think that is true, and you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't. I mean, what I'm doing right now is probably really foolhardy. I shouldn't be constantly talking about what the role of satire is if I'm just like a comedy writer, but. I do think of it more now as, guiding people, but also creating a shared sense of community, like-minded people bonding over sanity and honesty and not kind of becoming completely obsessed with BS, like looking past that BS, but also saying like, okay, once we do that, rather than just falling into cynicism and saying everything is a lie or whatever, like, can we create some like shared a consensus around what reality is? So I do think that is a little bit more of the project of The Onion right now. Like we have new owners. We have got new owners more than a year and a half ago, and they've been really great about allowing us to focus on the things that we care about. And we relaunched our print newspaper that has 55,000 subscribers now, and we're the 12th largest print newspaper in the country. We're bigger than Boston Globe, and we're on track to beat the Chicago Tribune, which is like, either good news for The Onion or bad news for print journalism. Right. Probably both of those are true. But I think there are so many publications out there now that are, worker owned or collectives, whatever, and it's people saying, our model is not going to be, let's inflate our click counts and do advertising, or like all of the things that we're creating is just an appendage to money making, which I think is the mindset of a lot of major corporations. It's like, we don't want to do good, that if we incidentally do good, then that's fine. But like, we got to just return money to our investors as much as possible. And the new model that is working for some people is like, let's do a Substack or Patreon or subscriber, and just like, this money is going to go into our pockets. It's not going to create like another business division or VP or whatever. It's just going to keep this core thing going. And if you like it, you should become part of this, community of like-minded people. If you don't, you can stop subscribing or just not pay attention at all. But we're not going to try to force ourselves down your throat. We're going to be there for people who want it.
That's so interesting. I was preparing to ask you what for The Onion. I guess it's The Onion particularly, but maybe we could broaden it to satire broadly. But I guess I'm curious what success looks like, right? And you sort of just touched on it a little bit. You sort of said what success wasn't for The Onion in terms of comparing it to different kinds of maybe more corporate sort of journalistic projects. But what is success for The Onion? What sort of at the weekly staff meeting, leadership meeting, what are the metrics that people are thinking about and like measuring to say like, yes, we are succeeding, we're hitting our mission, we are doing what we intend to do. What are some of those things?
I think, thankfully, a lot of it is qualitative versus quantitative.
Yeah.
Like, it is, do we continue to do what we've been doing for 35 plus years at the level of quality that it's been? And are our readers responding to it in the same way? Or are they kind of like annoyed and bummed out by our writing? And so, you know, are we just, you know, part of it is tending the fire of like, this institution's great. People have loved it for a really long time. Mm-hmm. I was a fan growing up. And so part of it is just like, I want to keep living in a world where The Onion is good and is not chasing after, you know, the wrong thing. Yeah. So just, you know, are those meetings happening daily? Is business not intruding on that? You know, are owners like willing to just be like, I just want to own The Onion. I love The Onion. And that is, thank God, where we're at right now. And outside of that, like metrics for like subscriptions and stuff. Sure. Like we want those to go up. We want to do cool partnerships with people that are like-minded and, you know, who have similar visions. But we are really in a place where there's like a deference from the, you know, business management side, who are just like, hey, we got this, you know, do we want to do something with this person? And if we are like, no, that's ridiculous, we shouldn't do that. Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, no, it is a bad idea. Like, and I think that consensus is incredibly hard to get.
Well, yes, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
And we just haven't had that for like any of our owners until now. Right. And it's been kind of a fever. It's felt for a while felt surreal to like really have owners who cared this deeply about it. And
it's amazing.
Yeah. So that's been a huge change.
Everything you said is super important and it's so poignant, and I'm happy you said it. And I was laughing to myself as you were talking, because when you described sort of The Onion being a project that's been around for 35 years, you want to sort of keep the rudder in the right direction and sort of stay true to who you are. What was coming to me was the opposite. I can't say the opposite. People have perceived it as the opposite of that, which is Cracker Barrel's sort of logo change. I don't know, in the last 2 months. Have you seen this? Have you heard about this?
Oh, the logo change. Yes,
from Cracker
totally.
Barrel. Yeah. And, you know, people were like some people were up in arms about it because they felt like it was Cracker Barrel somehow, for some reason. Right. They thought it was like a woke virtue signaling that they had changed.
Took the barrel out? Is that right?
Either the man or the barrel.
The barrel is gone. The man's inside of the barrel.
Is that?
He's been murdered and he's now in the barrel.
I think something like that happened, and people interpreted it as like Cracker Barrel has been caving to these sort of woke, progressive sort of pressures. Yeah. Whether that's true or not, people did not perceive them as being sort of a project that was sort of staying true to what it has been for all this time, which I think is what you all are trying to do at The Onion. So Cracker Barrel 0, The Onion 1.
Cracker Barrel, exactly. Did I mention the Cracker Barrel at some point?
You did.
Okay.
You did.
I totally forgot that. Spaced out completely.
It's okay. So I'm happy that you feel like you're at a company now with ownership that is supporting you all sort of being who you want to be. It's funny, you sort of talked about your vision or your understanding of the role of satire, and then by proxy of that, The Onion, as sort of shifting a little bit over the course of time to being one that is focused in some ways on community building, right? And sort of, well, it's funny because I would love to hear your thoughts on whether or not the community building is around like joy, or is it around despair, right? Or is it sort of a deficit-based sort of community building, sort of a trauma bond, as the Gen Zers say now? Or is it sort of like we're congealing around something that's really positive and worth sort of like supporting? How do you think about that community building from The Onion's perspective?
Well, like our motto is "Tu stultus es," which means you are dumb in Latin.
Okay, and so deficit-based community building.
It's the yes. Okay, there is a like perennial problem if you write comedy for long enough, and particularly satire, where you're critiquing social ills. Yeah. And so you're not suggesting what is the right solution to all these social ills. Right. And so there's a question of like, is that a recipe for despair? Like if all we're doing is saying the world is terrible, your local life is terrible, the national world is terrible, that is going to create a lot of cynicism. People are going to be like, yeah, the world is really bad. Why should we try to do anything about it? Right. I do think because we're not just an opinion website, we're a comedy website, there is joy that grounds you in the feeling of, you know, laughing at those terrible things. And there is a little bit of light shining in a direction, which is saying, let's get the hell away from whatever this terrible thing is. Like, let's move in the direction of truth and honesty, rather than like be mired in kind of indecision about how to deal with the fact that there is bad in the world.
It's so interesting because we talked earlier about, or you really said it, I'm just repeating it, that sort of the unique part about The Onion and satire is that it sort of maximizes the value of sort of otherwise mundane, boring aspects of life, right? And in some ways, it's sort of like, that's such a magical thing, right? Because you're sort of saying like, what we're doing is super simple and super passive, and like we're just sort of like picking up on the crumbs that people don't really like see value in.
Right.
But at the same time, by so doing that, you are really, I would argue, illuminating like the hardest to reach parts of our humanity, right? Because you're not like, you're actually really focusing on the stuff that like has all the magic. People just don't choose to sort of like lean into that stuff, right? It's not it's like paradoxically low-hanging fruit, but also not really, right? It's a complicated sort of situation.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that's so beautiful. And I also think that it then makes satire in The Onion as an example of that, the entry point for people into much more quote unquote important conversations, right? Like the satire is the tool to get you to focus on something that actually you should quote unquote be focusing on.
Yeah.
But again, that's also kind of complicated because like we're then trumping up these sort of like large grandiose things, the things that are like important for you to know. You have to focus on what the governor did today. You have to focus on what like new legislation happened today. And I don't think that all satirists think that that's actually the goal either, right? So how do you make sense of my rambling for the last 45 seconds?
Well, I mean, first of all, it was very wise what I said, and that you quoted at me. But it is like, I think it's true. I think about this sometimes as if you were to like create a anthropomorphized version of the New York Times, or the average newspaper, and bring them to a party. Is that person a good hang, or are they like a little bit like, did you hear about what's happening in Sudan? Like, did you know what's going on in the Middle East? Have you heard about all these sexual harassment allegations against this? And you're just like, I don't really know you. Like, why are you telling me all this stuff? Like, important stuff.
Right.
But it feels like you haven't established a rapport or a sense of the person as like an honest broker, or like a person that you want to spend time with, or like a coalition that you want to be part of. Yeah. And I think what humor does is it's like it takes that feeling of clenching up and like, why are we talking about this? And it eases it and relaxes it into a space where people are like, okay, so these are sane human beings who are at the Onion. They might be super neurotic or weird or, you know, eccentric or what. No, we are, but it's like they at least they like laughing. They're not unwilling to poke fun at themselves, and like a lot of the jokes at the Onion are at our own expense, and we're writing them about interactions we have at parties or whatever, and then you can get into that other stuff. Yeah. But it's just like, I think about this with protests sometimes. Like if you go to a protest and it's just everyone is angry and everybody just wants to destroy whatever they're protesting against, then maybe that's powerful, but there are going to be some people out there who are like, I don't think I'm part of this. Like I don't, because I don't know what's next outside of it, the anger here. And if it's a protest that has, you know, like humor in it, or warmth or kindness, or like welcoming energy for the people who do want to participate, then that can be a very powerful unifying force. Yeah.
As you were talking, and I don't think I prepared to talk about this, but it came to me as you were just speaking. I love to sort of explore for you, Mike, but also maybe for the set of colleagues, for the industry, how folks who are professional comedy writers or satirists, how you think about like conflict management. And I actually mean this, again, at an individual level, but also organizationally. Obviously, like the Onion is an organization. There are people there are organizational problems beyond just the writing, right? Yeah. But in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, all these folks are trained as professional comedians / comedic writers. Right. And I'm curious, you know, like once you've then broken down the wall, like in terms of people's clenching that you mentioned earlier with the comedy, right? Is there then still like the muscle and the capacity to then problem solve effectively outside of the comedy, because you're so like used to having the comedy be like the antidote to some of the problems, right? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, so how have you experienced like the combination of folks having like sharp spears in terms of their comedic ability, and then also needing to function in a world that isn't focused only on comedy, both organizationally and in the real world?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that there is that tendency, which can be great, but also sort of self-defeating, where everybody at the Onion is constantly trying to pull back a deep, dark conversation into something light or approachable.
Yeah.
Like, we talk about terrible things, you know, like I know everything about everyone's personal lives and tragedies and romantic lives and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's always not fodder, but it's always part of this kind of like elastic relationship where it's like, we are here for this particular thing, and we all want to be in kind of this light, frothy place of being able to make jokes out of it. I think that can keep you from having those kind of like nourishing, deep, powerful conversations. But also you can get those in other places besides the Onion's writers room.
Yeah, of course.
And so like that, I like get it. Like I like when there is some like natural friction between you and telling jokes on a daily basis, and so people come in on like a Monday morning and are not necessarily in the mood to write jokes, or if something terrible happens, you're not looking to write something really funny and light, and so I think it's important to find ways to kind of like grease the wheel and get people flowing and make it so we're not constantly being dragged down. So,
well, and it's funny because I started the question off individually, and at the same time, as you were talking, I realized that what I really had in the heart of my question that I was stumbling upon as you were talking was, I'm curious about this at a societal level too, right? Like you started earlier saying that, the 12th largest print publication, it's eclipsing some very traditional large market publications, right? And so one could imagine that if I wanted to sort of make some reaches about that, it's sort of like portions of the American public are so drawn to staying in like this sort of light, diluted, sort of non-serious sort of space, right? At the expense of them also then like going into exploring like more, not more substantive, but more sort of not just traditional, but like real grounded sources of media and content, right? And so one can imagine, if I'm being sort of dramatic about it, that sort of could be a leading indicator for a society that's both, there's options. It could either be a leading indicator for a society that is healthily like engaging in satire as part of like a healthy democracy, if you will, or fending off forces that might be trying to minimize that democracy. That's one option. The second could be they are like just eating the candy and they just love being in this sort of sugar high permanently and have no sense of like what's happening on the other side, right? So what do you make of that?
I guess it is a really bad sign if everyone is just reading The Onion and not going anywhere else. Like that is a bad space to be in. And you also don't, in terms of a good hang, like you don't want to be the person that is just constantly criticizing and not showing a path forward or not including some ounce of humanity in how you express your criticism or whatever. But I think that just means people need to find more substantive like media diets and not just stay in the shallows. But it is a problem I think about a lot, and I don't think there's a good solution, because I don't think The Onion should be an advocacy organization or an activist or be writing like propaganda for politicians or anything like that. And you could see an argument for why that should be the case. Like, well, this headline actually didn't change anything about this thing, so why are you even doing it? And I think shedding light on the thing is important, and that bringing people into the fold. But that, there are different ways of approaching it. There's this documentary about Anthony Novak, who was a victim of censorship from the Parma, Ohio police because he wrote a Facebook police beater, and they ended up SWAT raiding his house and putting him in jail. And the documentary is interesting because it starts in this like fun sort of, obviously Anthony Novick did not have a good time with that, but it's still like funny. Like he was making fun of the police. This is so ridiculous. Like that is an easy entry point. People are inherently interested in like, why would the police do this? This is so crazy. Like, how is this? This is not disrupting like civic services. They're like people calling in and just saying like, hey, did you asking the police like, did you see this ridiculous police page that was put up? But they're not saying like, I'm confused about this.
Right. This is a threat to me, or it's a harm to our society.
Right. Yeah. But the documentary does this cool thing where it pivots towards discussing qualified immunity as a larger concept, which is what all of it hinges on. And qualified immunity is this idea that if you are a civil servant and you commit something that might be unconstitutional or a crime, if there isn't like an exact precedent for that thing, then you have a lot of immunity.
Right.
So the documentary kind of like slow walks you towards that. It's like, hey, this is a fun joke. This is kind of interesting to see this, and it's a little silly, and then you get to a point where you're seeing this particular interesting example actually has repercussions writ large for our entire country, and that this is cropping up in more serious situations where people are murdered, and so I think there is room, and there's a cool way to do that. I don't think The Onion should or will do that sort of thing of like, hey, if you enjoyed this headline, here's a link to a nonprofit that can tell you more. It's like, I think you need to do that work yourself, or there need to be like activist organizations that are good at bringing people along. But
in this particular example, as you said earlier today, but those who are listening weren't there, The Onion was not, you're not just observing this sort of situation as a citizen talking about this documentary. Of course, The Onion had not a role to play in that, but they contributed to Anthony Novak's case in a particular way. I'll let you say more about it.
Go ahead. We wrote a amicus brief for this case, like asking the Supreme Court to take it up, and essentially saying like, as a satire publication, this affects our bottom line, and we care deeply about not getting sued and all that stuff. And but it also is written like as a example of parody. Like it was parodying what a Supreme Court brief is, and it was basically saying these are bone dry, the most boring format you could ever write, and it's read exclusively by incredibly boring people like lawyers and Supreme Court justices and stuff. And so like, can we mess with that format and make it surprising and break it apart and kind of deconstruct all the constituent parts that might be hiding the fact that a Supreme Court brief, either has a very simple argument or maybe doesn't have an argument at all, and is just using legalese to hide that. Like the same way that Supreme Court justices wear black robes and say things like stare decisis, because if they actually just dressed in like cargo shorts and a t-shirt, you would think, oh, that's just a normal guy. Why is Chief Justice Roberts like somebody who I should listen to as if he is the word of God and knows exactly what the founding fathers intended?
Well, it's funny. Again, everything you're saying is so important, and I swear to you, I'm not laughing at you because I'm not taking it seriously.
Are you talking about Cracker Barrel?
No, I'm not. I promise you. What I am thinking about, though, is it's actually part and parcel of what you're saying. It's funny because you said earlier today in the conversation that one of the functions of satire and parody is sort of to burst the bubble that authority figures or folks in power generally have sort of created around themselves or the societies in which they are sort of functioning, right? And so this example of sort of peeling back sort of the wigs and the black robes of justice in this example is sort of a way of that, right? But as you were talking, I was laughing in sort of a institutionally.
Were you picturing Chief Justice Roberts completely naked?
No, I don't think so.
Because it seemed like you were peeling away his clothes.
You think
very
so?
Slow. Well, I mean, you were on your way there.
That's
I don't
not
know
my
what.
type.
Yeah, okay.
It's not my type. But what I was gonna say is that I was laughing at Vassar because we have actually had student petitions is a strong word, but student advocacy or inquiry about why our diplomas are still written in Latin.
Right.
And it seems like it's right on the nose of what you're talking about, right? And that like the Latin in the diploma could be seen as sort of just not a farce, but sort of a constructed sort of cover right? That makes the institution and those who sort of run it seem much more important, and the rituals much more important than they actually are, right? And so it just seems like an exact parallel of what you're talking about.
No, it's like you think of them as if they're magic words, like because I'm quoting Catullus right now in the original Latin, that's like very, very smart and interesting. But the fact is, like, Catullus is writing jokes that would be at home in Austin Powers or something like that. And it's like, they're just human beings. The founding fathers were human beings. Like the ancient Romans were human beings. And we treat them as if they are so elevated into the stratosphere that they're not even worth looking at in that light. And
it's so funny. I had a boss a long time ago who I actually found them to be incredibly funny. But they didn't think of themselves that way, and certainly I don't think wanted to be seen that way. They grew up in a very particular in a particular generation, in a particular part of this country, and so I think they were reared in a way that sort of, you know, valued stoicism and production and all those kinds of seriousness, all those things. So when I told them once that they were very funny, I think they were really offended because I don't think that was a value that they sort of held, and there wasn't any sort of currency in being seen as funny.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Whereas for me, it wasn't meant to be an insulting thing at all. In fact, I actually probably was trying to say that I admire you even more than I would otherwise because I find you particularly funny, right? But I think to this point about humanization, right? I think they either weren't recognized or didn't want to be humanized in the way of humor,
That's
right?
fascinating,
Or didn't want to be seen as someone who was human in a way that humor was part of just who they were, right?
I just consider it such a like deep part of our shared humanity, and it's something that everybody likes. Like, you want to be funny, you want to get the joke. You should feel kind of weird if everyone in the room is laughing. You're like, but I don't get it. Like, why would the man falling downstairs be funny? It's like I don't know, like, and it's something you should be suspect about if a politician can't laugh at themselves or feel like they're threatened by somebody making fun of them. It's like, what, really? Like, you think. Like, there's the Turkish President Erdogan.
Not predator.
Yeah, right.
Is he a predator and we don't know it?
Maybe. I don't know. But he arrested a editorial cartoonist for making a cartoon of him as a kitty cat, like with a little ball of yarn and stuff, and publishing it in a newspaper. And it's like, that's like the most adorable thought crime ever committed. It's like you're putting him into jail for years for that. It's insane. Like, that reaction is like, imagine if I had made a joke about you or Jim, and Jim had stormed in here and like arrested me and perp walked me around Vassar. Like,
Jim would do that.
He would do that, and we know that about Jim intuitively. I picked that up about him just from like a brief interaction. But yeah, it's just like that. Like, again, if you think of someone besides a president or prime minister behaving this way, you would be like, that is the behavior of a sociopath or a psychopath. And sometimes we tolerate it because it has the trappings of an institution.
Right. Well, we talked around this a lot, but I want to sort of put a finer point on it. So, and we sort of at the beginning talked about the America we're in now being different than the one you grew up in, particularly as it relates to the role or presence of satire. And so I just would love to spend a few moments thinking about sort of the intersection of satire and, I guess you could say, politics, but I guess I also really mean like democracy. And obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but my hypothesis has been that things have changed in the world of satire, the culture of satire in the last, 10 or 15 years. And so how do you think about the role, if there is a role, of satire in politics? You sort of said, earlier, you intimated that you didn't quite think that like your role would sort of play an advocacy role. You were sort of just sort of meant to be like, shining a light on something, right? But talk to me about that. Talk to me about what you think the role of satire is or has been in politics.
Yeah, I think of it more as a Geiger counter for free speech and a healthy democracy. It's not that what we write is going to have a measurable policy impact. That would be a crazy expectation of an Onion headline. But that if what we're writing is getting us in legal and financial trouble. That means that free speech is being curtailed, and if free speech
is sort of a barometer.
It's a barometer, and you know what is never going to happen is they're going to round up every satirist and put them in jail. But what is going to happen, or could happen, is that there is a element of self-doubt and suspicion. Yeah, and that's the, you know, the abstract concept of the chilling effect is, you know, if we're in the writer's room and we say, like, you know, there was that case recently where so-and-so had to pay $1.5 million because the president was really frustrated that they happened to write a silly little joke about him. Should we not publish this? Like, that's, you know, because if we get hit with a lawsuit like that, then we're out of business. And like, when you have to start doing an internal calculus about what is worthy of publication, even though you think all of it is worthy of publication, that's when you have started to like slide into a really censorship-based regime.
Yeah. How have you all navigated that? Or when that happens, when you feel like it is happening in the writer's room, what do you do to sort of take stock of it, note it for what it is? Like, what, because it's a slide, as you said, it's gradual, it's not sort of acute, right? So how do you sort of keep your finger on the pulse? And when you do sort of sense there might be sort of a warning sign, what do you all in the writer's room do to sort of respond to that?
Right. Yeah, we're still thankfully protected by a lot of precedent.
Yeah.
I think most of the justices right now are if they have a consensus on anything, it's on the sanctity of free speech. But you know, there are like toes in the door right now. Like, qualified immunity is a toe in the door, and you know, slap lawsuits are a toe in the door. And so thankfully, as an independent publication, like, we don't have a massive corporation that's tallying out like, oh, well, if they publish this headline, like, we're going to lose this amount of money, and do they actually make that much money from ads? Like, like, we're not thinking about that. And so those conversations don't happen. But like, you know, younger writers or people who are just starting out, I think they don't have that intuitive sense of like, this is something that we can either take for granted or really lean on hard. So like, we at one point before Trump ran for president, Michael Cohen, his legal fixer, sent us a long threatening letter saying he was going to sue us into oblivion if we didn't take a really graphic headline about him and his physique off the internet. And he said, prepare yourself accordingly, and like, we'll see you in court and all that. And our response is just, no, that's not going to happen. This is going to be laughed out of court. Like, you are going to lose so much money from a countersuit. And so we still lean on that. And, you know, hopefully it doesn't break.
Yeah. Wow. One of the things that I was curious about as we were thinking about satire in politics, satire in community, is sort of how you all construct a writer's room that contains individuals who like have the widest set of perspectives, reference points, because obviously like humor is not an absolute sort of thing, right? People find things funny or not based on where they sit in the world and how they live and who they are, right? And so I'm just curious how you all try to find a collective true north or a collective, like, okay, this is like the line through which like we're going to make a joke about something, because we can assume or we know through qualitative data that like that many folks will understand this perspective or find it funny. Like, how do you try to create sort of a communal global sense of humor when you're writing for such a like diverse and complicated set of people?
Well, it sounds like a tautology, but The Onion is the true north of The Onion. It's like, we all grew up either reading it or working at it, like from the late 80s on. And we have been drawn to The Onion through the sort of love for the craft of it and the perspective on like Midwestern dumbness and fast food and you know, like our internal neuroses and things like that. Like, it feels like previous generations of Onion writers, there's like this commonality of like the weirdness and eccentricity. And so like, I think the room is curated by its love of the institution, and that builds a kind of shared respect and a foundation of like, if you're here, you deserve to be here.
Yeah.
As like somebody coming up through the ranks at the Onion, from a contributor to head writer now, the sort of change for me is moving from just like advocating for my own stuff, thinking that what I'm here to do is like, if I don't like a specific joke, I need to tell everybody that I don't like that joke.
Okay.
To everyone here is really, really good at what they do. They're like some of the best writers in the business. And I am not there to make this into Mike's private comedy blog. Right. Like, this is, if everybody in the room really loves something and I happen to be the odd man out for whatever reason, you know, I don't get a reference, or like this particular kind of humor is like a little weird for me or whatever. It's like, my role is to get out of the way and just be like, so many people are going to love this.
Yeah.
And the magic of the writer's room is that when we have something close to a consensus on a joke, it does resonate with like hundreds of thousands or millions of people.
Yeah.
And that's like, there are lots of ways of referring to that, but like the sort of oversoul, I guess, is the you're nodding like, I get that. Like, who is that? It's like Emerson, I think.
Yeah.
But it's just basically like, if you see a production of Macbeth, like you've never been a Scottish king, but you're like, oh no, I get that. Like, I understand. I've felt jealousy and anger and murderous rage and all that stuff. And it's like, if we talk about, the average life of an American, like, so many people are going to get that.
Yeah.
And there's just something really, really special about that ability to do that.
I'm curious too, with this in mind, as our society sort of ebbs and flows in terms of the kinds of things that are top of mind, valued, centered, I'm just curious how the writer's room responds to that, right? Like, an example I'm thinking about is like, in 2020, there was a particular racial reckoning in this country, right? Yeah. That people might argue we've sort of retreated from in the last year and a half to 2 years, right? And so I'm then curious sort of how the Onion's writer's room, do they sort of track those ebbs and flows? Like, are the tenor of the jokes aligned with sort of these broader societal changes?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
It's so interesting because ostensibly it's some of the same writers too, right?
Yes.
But they're reacting to a different world, a different landscape in the world, but still with their own personal perspective in the world, right? So it's sort of like a multivariable calculus question,
right? Well, it's just that we're not, we are not existing inside of an iron lung or some like a diving bell or something like that. Like, we are exposed to the world. Our role is to take that in and process it and spit it back out. And so it's like, we have to respond in different ways. And so, like, earlier today I was talking about the 9/11 issue, which was published like a week after 9/11 happened. And what the Onion didn't do is just say, we're just going to go with the issue that we had already written and that was supposed to go out hours before 9/11 happened. The writer said, okay, let's take a beat, spend like a week or so reflecting and figuring out like what is an appropriate response to where we are as a country right now. And that ended up being much more focused on like emotional catharsis instead of like easy jokes, and kind of just addressing the confusion and rage and sadness that was in the air at that point. I think good writers are hopefully able to kind of flow with where the world is at, instead of just like, like I don't want to call out Carrot Top, but like if you're like a stand-up comedian like him or Gallagher or something like that, where your whole thing is like, I have like one mode and I got to stick to that one mode because people really love it. I'm sure you can make money, but it feels stale. It's like you're a novelty act. And I think what the Onion has done time and again is really respond to the changes, not just in what the news is, but what is the structure of the news even. Like, where it started out as a National Enquirer parody, and then it moved to broadsheet like USA Today. Then it became a website before a lot of places. We started doing, YouTube videos, like TV
TikToks.
series, movies, and TikToks, exactly, podcasts, and so it was kind of like, that's, I think, what's so great about The Onion is it's all-encompassing perspective more than anything, like an approach to the world, rather than just we're going to give you the same thing again and again and again.
Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to touch on in this sort of dimension of satire in maybe politics or democracy is sort of the treatment, I guess I can say, that The Onion gives to school shootings. Maybe it's mass. I don't think, is it mass shootings in general, or is it
mass
school shootings?
Yeah.
Okay. So describe. I don't want to misquote it. Describe for the listener sort of what the headline is that The Onion runs whenever there is unfortunately a mass shooting.
Yeah. So the headline's "No way to prevent this as only nation where this regularly occurs or happens," and where that came from was essentially we'd been writing headlines about mass shootings many times a year, and every time it happened we would have an emergency brainstorm, have to do a long thread and try to come up with, what is the new take, what can we possibly say about the thing that is continually happening and does not seem to be changing from a policy perspective or from, in terms of the divides in the country. And what we ended up settling on at some point was, well, it's actually sort of disingenuous to write something new, because that implies that the situation on the ground is changing. And
it's not. So
instead, we should just run that headline every time there's a mass shooting and change the dateline and the picture. Usually it's of like a vigil or like the police outside of a school, and then, change the casualty count. And that has become one of the most iconic Onion headlines, because I think it really speaks to the sense of stagnancy around that issue, that people really just have no idea how to respond to that, because it's just we can have these outpourings of grief, we can feel deeply about it, but nothing's changing. And so that's a situation where that isn't a headline that's changing anybody's voting preferences probably, but it is at least kind of giving a little bit of a balm to people who are, really struggling with that reality of American life.
And I think I heard you say earlier today too, that even though it has not maybe been intended to be something that changes folks' sort of voting patterns or voting practices, I do think I heard you say that there was sort of a group or organization that had sort of latched onto this sort of creative and cultural moment that you all created, in a way that might actually have some practical and objective and concrete societal changes. So,
which is the Sandy Hook families approached us because they liked our coverage of mass shootings and essentially said, there might be a world where The Onion could take charge of Alex Jones's InfoWars and do something interesting with it, which I can't really get into. But that's just been an ongoing conversation and kind of legal fracas that's come about because of that.
And I guess I want to go back to a question I asked earlier about success, because how do you all see that interaction? How do you all, in terms of a success paradigm, right? The fact that they approached you all at all, given your coverage of these mass shootings that way, maybe success is not the right way to think about it, but how do you think about that? Is it sort of like, okay, we're doing something that's right or meaningful, or are you sort of like, oh, this is just sort of a anomalous sort of externality of our work? Like, where do you place that organizationally?
Yeah, I think it is a balancing act, because we don't want to become an advocacy or activist organization, and we think that's better left to other people. And I think it also turns off a lot of readers if it feels like we're just trying to like hit them over the head with some particular ideology or something like that. So I do think of it as anomalous in a similar way to the amicus brief. Like
You're not going to keep writing more amicus briefs.
I think something has gone really wrong if I've written more than one amicus brief in my lifetime. But it's an interesting opportunity, and kind of it felt like it made sense at the moment, and so it's something we're still exploring.
My favorite, this is much less, well, I guess it's serious, but it's funny in the way that life is complicated. So my favorite reference point around a similar sort of recurring headline that people use is, so I'm from Florida. The listeners know I'm from Florida, which could be a joke in and of itself. The Florida man thing is like, that's satire. But the Brightline train. I mean, the Brightline is like one of the country's like first semi-high speed privately owned trains or whatever, and they operate right now just from in Florida from like Miami to Orlando.
Right.
But they're always hitting people. Like the Brightline's always hitting a car. So I think it's the Florida Man Instagram page has a recurring headline of like Brightline hits another effing car again.
Yeah,
and it's like the same headline, and they post it whenever there is an actual like Brightline crash with the car.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to actually realize that it was tracking with real incidents on the train. Like I thought they were just sort of making like this like playful joke about the Brightline disaster so often. Yeah. And I was like, oh no, like there was actually a person hit again.
Totally. Yes.
Like, and they're trying to draw attention to that in a similar kind of way. So.
Yeah. No, I think it also speaks to like there's just this particular feeling to being a bystander to much larger events that keep happening.
Yeah.
There's it's like, I don't know, like if a stampede of clowns were to like walk down like Main Street and it's just happening outside of your window, like at random times of night, like 1 a.m. they're just honking their horns and like tumbling around and stuff. And it's just like at some point you're like, should we do something about this? And everybody's just like, I can't do anything. They're just
life,
like the clowns
exactly.
show up. Like I don't know what you're talking about. Like
just life.
And I don't know. It's just like. I think it's nice to just at least acknowledge it. At least acknowledge that the clowns are here, even if we can't do anything about them. Like,
well, because in some way it's sort of a product in truth telling, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the acknowledgement is sort of just like doing the little bit of extra work of saying like this happened, right? Because when you don't do that, you can imagine, right, that like there's extreme ambiguity and like a clarity about what has happened, what is happening, because no one's named it,
right?
Right,
yes.
and so I do think to your point. The observation is not really just sort of like, it's not really just like a simple personal project. It really is a contribution to like the societal, like, like non-fake news, right? We're trying to create a sort of a collective consensus as a community on what has happened.
Right.
And so that's important.
Yeah, this happened. And then if we all can at least agree that this happened, then at least we can start having a conversation about what to do about that.
Absolutely.
That fact. Yeah.
As we sort of come to partially the end of our conversation, I'm thinking about, I was trying to think the whole time about an analogy for the sort of the role of satire, maybe the Onion. And I kept thinking about it in terms of physical objects. And I'm thinking about like a hammer and a mirror. And I'm curious that the hammer being something that like is actively sort of guiding or sort of pushing something in a particular way, right? The mirror being something that's just reflecting back what's already there, right? And I'm curious where you sort of think the Onion falls on the spectrum of being a hammer for society, in that it could be creating narratives, even though the argument is that the writing room is sort of reproducing what they've seen or experienced, right? But they're reproducing it and writing about it in a way that could create a new narrative in some way, right? And or it could simply just be a mirror and that they're shining the light and sort of wayfinding. Where do you think the Onion and satire falls on that spectrum?
It's kind of a little bit of both, isn't it? It's maybe a hammer smashing the mirror.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like we reflect what's happening in society, but then there's also the fact that we want to break out of the narratives that people have already made for themselves. Yeah. So I think like a lot of the more forceful hammers in society have misguided people, whether it's the federal government or going back to like the New York Times kind of steering people in the wrong direction on weapons of mass destruction or something. Like there are a lot of things that have kind of poisoned the well of trust in mainstream news. And I think through the fact that humor is this like humanizing, deeply felt force that people really enjoy, you can at least kind of lure people into starting to question that kind of stuff and have a deeper conversation instead of just pursuing either the orthodoxy or like checking out completely.
Yeah, so it's like a little love tap. It's not like a smashing of the hammer, but it's like a little it's a gentle little
I think so. Yeah, I don't think we because I again, like if you personify the hammer, like anybody who's coming to a party and just hitting people over the head repeatedly, bashing them into submission is going to be thrown out pretty quickly.
But if I'm like, so I'm not trying to be like the aggressive drink pusher at the party.
Right.
But if I'm like giving you like, some little taste and sips here and there.
You like this? You want this?
Try this.
This is an Americano.
I got this new drink. Try it. See if you like it.
Yeah, and it's like if you don't like it, maybe try this drink. Try this one.
That's the onion, right?
That's the onion. Yeah.
I love it.
Yes.
I want to do a couple things.
Yes.
I want to do our student hot seat segment.
Okay, great.
Which our listeners have heard before, but I have to tell them it's going to be done a little bit differently this time.
All right.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a couple of headlines from our Vassar student newspaper, the Miscellany News.
Yes.
And I want you to tell me if you think they are true stories or not.
Amazing.
Based on the headline.
Yeah, let's get into it. I'm excited.
So I think, let me see, there are 6 of them here.
Yeah.
Okay. The first one is film major goes viral in ode to Keke Palmer.
I think that's absolutely true, right?
That's your final answer?
Yes.
It is true.
Yes.
Cole Smith, class of 26, posted a comedy skit on TikTok that recently blew up after he made a post that shouted out Keke Palmer. So that's true.
Yeah.
2, performative male contest was a plot to harvest pea milk.
So I know about pea milk from a conversation earlier today. So I know pea milk is a real thing.
I guess at Vassar, since you talked about it at Vassar earlier today. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. So that at least is true. But is the performative male contest?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, performative. Is it M-A-L-E or M-A-I?
Good question. M-A-L-E.
M-A-L-E. Performative male
like
contest.
in the patriarchy.
Yes. I'm going to say false.
That's your final answer?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
This was the post in the humor section of
Amazing.
the Miscellany News.
Okay, great.
Number 3. Hoax bomb threat directed at Davison Hall.
It feels true.
Final answer?
I think so.
This is true. This happened, unfortunately, earlier this year.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Number 4. Comedians expose the Vassar Students Association at Town Hall roast.
True?
Final answer?
Yeah.
True.
Yes.
The VSA did an event with Indecent Exposure, a student group, that included a roast.
Amazing.
Number 5. MAGA high schooler attempts coup after losing election.
That's false.
Final answer?
Yeah.
It is false.
Yes.
Again, a post in the Miscellany News humor section. And number 6.
Okay.
Westboro Baptist Church retracts statement calling Vassar an Ivy League whorehouse after realizing Vassar isn't a part of the Ivy League.
Oh, wow. Okay, that is clearly false.
You think so?
Yeah.
It is false.
Yeah.
This was part of the April Fool's Day edition of the Miscellany News.
I love it.
You, 100%, you must be the head writer at The Onion to be able to discern these headlines correctly.
Or it's amazing satire.
Yes.
I think that's the thing about satire is it the reasonable reader can see through it.
Yes, that is 100% true. Mike, I want to try a new segment with you on the podcast today. Our listeners have never seen this before.
Okay.
But it's called the Salt Line Show and Tell.
Yes.
And let me just describe it briefly. Obviously, our conversation today, but all of our podcast conversations center around these salt lines, these points of juxtaposition, convergence of difference. We have satire in society, satire in politics, humor and joy, seriousness and humor, all these sorts of salt lines that we sort of explored in our conversation today. But I also want to start a practice whereby we are inviting our guests to sort of bring physical items that demonstrate the salt lines in their life or in their career. And so you are our first guinea pig of this new segment. Yeah. And so I would love for you to present to us. Think back to when you were in middle school and you read your first Onion article. Yeah. But in the class before that, it was show and tell.
Yeah.
We're doing the same thing here.
Okay.
So you get the premise of the exercise?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm going to let you present your salt line objects in whatever way you'd like.
Okay. So the first thing I am going to bring in is a meditation cushion. I am a active meditator. I kind of in the Zen Buddhism tradition. I've been doing that for most of my life. And I think there's a really interesting overlap between mindfulness and humor. I think that process of crystallizing something that's kind of weird or off or you don't like or you do like and being conscious of that that's obviously a part of sitting down and meditating and focusing on your thoughts and stuff. But I think humor does that too, in that, you know, like if I am at a party and I'm trying to get inside of a social circle and I stand at the side of the social circle and say nothing and just nod and just like try to wait for like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and then like turn and try to go to another circle and come back, and like that is an occurrence that happens a decent amount in my life, where it's just like, I should probably say something. I don't know. I have nothing to add to this conversation.
Right.
I don't know what anybody is talking about. That you can take that, you can reduce it into like 7 words, and you can heighten it maybe a little bit, but then you have a joke. And instead of being kind of in a state of spiraling about like, oh, I'm such an idiot, why can't I just be good at having conversations at a party? You can transcend it a little bit. And I think similarly, meditating gives you this moment of like, you have these insane internal monologues and insane like inability to just be like, can I focus on my breath for more than half a second without like all that stuff coming in? And instead of falling into it or feeling bad that stuff bubbles up, you can just be like, oh, that is part of being human. That's always going to be there. And instead of closing the door to it, you open it in, you let it in, and you just deal with it kind of in a healthy way. Yeah.
So that's object number 1.
Object number 1, yeah.
And what is the other object we're juxtaposing that with to create this salt line?
So I would say that the intersection for me is, you know, the onion is a deeply important part of my life. And so I just brought a laptop, opened up to theonion.com. This is how I started reading The Onion. I think as a middle schooler, I was reading it, and it just struck me as so true and honest about what average American life is. It wasn't like this elevated, lofty, poignant reflection on everything the way that like a poem or novel would be, and it wasn't everything is terrible or catastrophizing nationally the way that like a newspaper might do, but instead it was much more, you know, what is buffet procedure? What should I go to this restaurant or that restaurant, and what rest stop should I be at? And like, as just a suburban 11-year-old, 12-year-old, I kind of was like, oh, this feels like it's speaking truthfully, and so I think the intersection here is really like, there is a project of just being honest with yourself that comes from both comedy and meditation and mindfulness, and so I think that's where I've landed, is just at the crux of honesty and authenticity and stuff. Not to talk myself up too much, but
no. The podcast is about you and your work, and
okay.
I'm so grateful that you were so honest and were so authentic, not only in this last sort of segment, but in our whole conversation. And I think the honesty and authenticity you just showed, I think, is mirrored in your work, but also broadly at The Onion. And I think The Onion is this incredible publication that does do the work of being thoughtful and meditative, and finding a way to sort of reflect on our current moment in a way that can sort of make it easier to metabolize for our society. And that's an important project. So
yeah, I really appreciate that.
No, it's what you just said. It's what you do, and it's what The Onion has done for others. So I'm so grateful that you were here to talk us through some of that, to explore some of those thought lines. And it was so fun talking to you, Mike.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
I have to say, I'm curious. I'm nervous about whether or not, like, in the next few months, there's going to be an Onion headline that I can clearly attribute to you having some thoughts about our conversation.
Yes.
Like, I just feel like if I search the Vassar entry again on the search bar for The Onion in like 9 months, I'm gonna find something where I'm like, oh my gosh, Mike is making fun of me because he did not either enjoy our conversation or he found something particularly funny about it that he didn't reveal to me in person while we were talking together.
It's not going to be about you. It's going to be about Jim. And you're going to know it, and you're going to love it.
I'm going to love it. Yes. That will make Jim's life. I'm telling you.
Okay.
He will be so happy if he becomes the butt of an Onion joke. Jim is going to like quit working at Vassar, quit producing this podcast, and just like
track me down.
Punish me for he's gonna frame it, put it on his wall at home, have you sign it. That'll make Jim's life.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm here for.
I'm going to hold you to it.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of Conversations at the Salt Line. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.